Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Mediation and Beyond YouTube channel. Thanks so much for stopping by. I'm really excited today to have Alex Yaroslavsky. He's an executive coach, mediator, and trainer. Alex is an executive coach with 20 plus years of coaching, teaching, and mediation experience in a variety of industries, including financial services, technology, nonprofits, pharmaceuticals, construction, higher ed. He's a Goldman L certified meta coach and is an expert in emotional intelligence. Alex has been featured in the 2021 Hollywood produced film Impact, which I've not seen. So I want to actually ask you about that.
Yeah, sure.
Alex has a passion in building trusted partnerships with senior leaders to help them create highly effective and collaborative teams. His coaching style is to encourage clients to be receptive and actionable on honest feedback and effectively read their audience. Clients learn proven methods to speak with executive presence and successfully navigate difficult situations, not so easily done. Having lived in Asia and Europe, Alex has a global perspective, so necessary, and special appreciation of cross-cultural communication. Immersion in new languages and cultures has taught him many of the emotional intelligence, tone, and body language. He trains clients to speak directly, diplomatically, and effectively. And he's created several courses on managing challenging conversations, which he delivered in the United States, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So thanks for coming on, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Colleen. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So the reason, we connected at an online event. And the reason, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was in talking with you, I really wanted, since we're both kind of in that mediation arena, and mediation can be used, I think, in everything you do, down to parenting. So it's kind of, right?
Often necessary.
Absolutely. So, but I wanted to speak to, at the moment, I just wanted to speak around mediation and divorce right now.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that? How have you seen that play out? Have you found it to be an effective tool for most people? What's your experience been?
Well, so some of my experience has been very personal. I participated in mediation as part of my own divorce. And compared to other people I have seen who've had a more legal, path to it, my path was much more preferable. It's much less expensive. It led to a much better outcome where we crafted our own agreement around things that worked for us. And so we've had actually with my ex a better relationship after we mediated than we did before throughout our marriage. So I would highly recommend it for people who decide that they no longer want to be married. That's a much better option than going through a legal process.
Yeah, actually, I went through the legal process. I got divorced in the 90s. And so kind of before mediation was popular, although I wanted to do mediation. But at the end of it, the end of everything, my boxes were taller than I stand. I'm 5'8", pretty tall. The boxes were taller than I am. And so, and in all those boxes, it's cha-ching, 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 money unnecessarily spent.
Yep. Yeah, because the legal profession treats marriage as kind of as a business negotiation. And it just so doesn't fit what most marriages are. I mean, some marriages maybe are like that, but most marriages aren't like that. It's about a relationship, and the reason they break up isn't because someone makes a rational decision to say it doesn't suit my best interest going forward to be married to you, and I want to be married to someone else. Right? It doesn't happen that way.
Like, I'd like to sell the marriage, right? Sell my end.
I like to sell the marriage. Exactly. I like to sell the marriage. Right? What's my option? It doesn't work like that, right? So it's very much a personal experience, and we just don't have a structure except for mediation in our society to be able to unwind that and conclude it, I would say, in a way that sort of honors the experience, that it takes into account the needs of the kids as they do this. And then how do you have sort of this post-marriage relationship with people, because you're still parents if you have kids. if you don't have kids, you could just, dissolve it and go your separate ways. But if you have children involved, there's always a connection, even if it's an unpleasant one. It's a connection.
Yes, it's yeah, and it's a lifelong connection. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not something until they're who's paying college. It goes beyond that as well.
absolutely.
And it's not the
Absolutely.
payment piece. So did you find that through your work experience that mediation for women and men is different? Do you find that entering in there's different fears or do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, there are different fears. I think that for the man, I can tell you the fear is that the system is rigged against you, and especially in New York. And so the story sort of, as you hear these stories, is that the courts are against you, and it's very much, the laws are against you. And I also found, as we were speaking through some of these things and the mediator told us what the laws were, yeah, they were antiquated. They were written, I don't know, 40 years ago, when women were at home, didn't have any income and didn't have any assets in their name. So there were no credit cards, there were no mortgages, there's nothing around that. And so the laws were written with that in mind. The idea being that the husband decides to run off with the secretary and leaves the wife and the children destitute, while he and the new Mrs. whatever are enjoying sort of their time in Bermuda. And so the laws are written against that to make sure that women who are homemakers are provided for and aren't just left to do whatever they can to make ends meet, right? But that's not the world in which we live in today. Today we live in the world where women and men most of the time both work and work quite hard. And so now when it comes to when it comes to payments around support and so on, the calculation is basically whoever makes more pays, but it doesn't matter how much more you make. So you could make $10 more than you pay. And the formula is not you pay $10 worth. The formula is, very different. So that's sort of the male perspective of it, that it's just so, not in keeping with the reality of what's happening in the real world.
So it's kind of like family court, family laws haven't kept up to speed with the changing family,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
right,
So we're taking a current family and sticking it into an antiquated system.
right. That's one, right?
Right.
And then the other piece I think is just child custody and sort of parenting, co-parenting, as who gets the child is how it's sort of presented.
Yeah.
And I know people who went through hell to negotiate something that was really just a few days worth of it. It wound up being a few days worth of difference, but it seems so huge, when you're negotiating it. It works out to be okay in the end, but yeah, it's very painful. So I'm
And
lucky to have escaped it.
so your business called Get Conflict Yes,
Yeah.
right? How did you get to yes? What did you how did that mediator in your mind,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that's the way you do it, but how did you
Right.
what was helpful to get to yes?
Yeah, so my own path to mediation was I started out when I was very young, interested in being a negotiator, and I didn't even know that mediation existed. But I was interested in the psychology of it, like how did people get better deals? Some people did, and some people didn't. And so I got some tapes and I listened to those. And then I studied it in college and I went to graduate school for industrial labor relations. And I was really interested in the negotiation piece of it. And then there in grad school, I had an opportunity to become trained as a mediator in a community setting. And so I did that piece. And the way that I would get to yes in those settings was to effectively coach people, which I didn't know I was doing. But I would speak with one party then I would speak with another party. And back then, by the way, speaking with people separately was sort of a big controversial a tactic. It's
Right.
called caucusing. And
Right.
a lot of community-based mediators didn't like that. They thought that all mediation should be done together in what's called a joint session, sort of with everyone sitting together. And that wasn't my style. So I discovered that what was effective for me was to separate people after a while, after sharing some facts and interests, and then understand their interests and coach them, build trust with them, and then help them reach this yes situation, which sometimes was easy, sometimes wasn't easy. But what I could do is I got enough information as I was doing those things for me to develop the skill to be able to speak to one person and have a sense of what the other person's perspective might be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the other view of that? And as I did that, then I parlayed it into my coaching, where a lot of people come to me with conflicts around, communication and giving feedback and et cetera. And I'm able to listen to what they're saying and imagine, and I've, pretty closely to being right about what the other person might be thinking and feeling on the other side of that.
And kind of step into somebody else's shoes,
Hmm.
see it from
Yeah.
their lens.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're right. It just means you're seeing it from their lens.
Completely. Yeah. And there's no right to it. It's just everyone has their point of view, but often people are stuck. They just don't see the other person's perspective.
I think that's I think they get stuck in their emotions on it. And whether it's a business deal, a divorce, whatever it is, you're stuck in your emotion on it. And it's helping somebody kind of shift or pivot their emotion a little bit so you can kind of open it up to stepping into the other person's shoes without saying that the other person is right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And understanding the other person doesn't mean agreeing with them. And this is where a lot of my clients have to have a big sort of shift around this, because to them, when they come in, the idea of even acknowledging the other person is just so antithetical to their whole existence. That it does quite a bit of work around that piece. And so I think first what has to work is they have to build trust with me. So when I say that to them, they have to hear it as me saying it as a neutral person, not as me, the agent of the other person, saying it.
Which is a very difficult line to be on, because if you honor that you heard the other person, the other person thinks you're now aligning, and you're like, no, I'm just hearing what
Yeah.
you're saying. There is no alignment. I'm not aligning myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and most people are able to hear it. I sometimes get resistance around that, and I test it and I work with it, and most of the time it's okay. In some extreme cases, I think people have such a need for I would say sort of this narcissistic quality to their personality that doesn't allow them to entertain the other. It has to be all about them.
Yeah.
And I've had situations where I said to one person, so the other person from their perspective is asking you to be reasonable, what they consider reasonable. And the person answered, why do I have to be reasonable? And so that's an example of that. So those are, limited situations. Most people would just say, I understand about reasonable. Here's what reasonable looks like.
Yes, and those personalities are very hard to deal with. I find, especially, I'm actually having somebody on tomorrow to talk about narcissism and to really break it down, because it's an overused, misused
Yep.
word. And I just want to break it down to what are the real traits of a person. But having a mental health background, I get that, like
Right.
and much like yourself, get what a narcissist is. But do you find in mediation that you're able to actually effectively mediate with a narcissist, or do you have to have a different tactic in order to do that?
Most of the time I can, and we all have narcissistic tendencies. That's just
Absolutely.
like, right. It's like human trait. And to some extent, this narcissism is helpful because it allows you to create yourself from other people, it allows you to have boundaries. And so it's, but then when it's overplayed, it
Yes.
becomes an issue. And in conflict, narcissism is often overplayed. So the fact that I see it doesn't bother me at all.
Okay.
But it's only when the person is just incapable of playing with it themselves, of laughing at it, of going through it. And some people, have that quality to them where they are so, I would say, unalert for those kinds of violations that really interferes with their life. And one of the reasons, they show up with me working with them is because they haven't been able to manage their own relationships well.
So it's almost, in that sense, if you're not able to work with them in the mediation, you can certainly help shift them over to the coaching arena to help coach them through that tendency.
Yeah, I would actually say if it doesn't work with mediation, I put the mediation and coaching together, but I think of it more as a therapeutic than experience that they need. because that's a piece that just doesn't it prevents them from being functional. And to me, that's a distinction between therapy and coaching,
Absolutely.
right? Is
Yep.
that if you can't function, you really need a therapist. You need a different skill set.
Yes. And so your movie that you were in, Impact,
Yeah.
is that about emotional intelligence there, or what is that about?
Yes. Yeah. So the movie follows three people on their path from not being able to do certain things to then having them happen and doing them. And the way that the movie is set up is that these people deal with a number of coaches, each of them having their own style. And it's a little bit of a showcase for coaches to
Oh,
show how they work with different clients.
nice.
So I'm one of those. And my client, Stan, had trouble publishing things on social media, because he was reluctant to move forward with his business. So
Got
I was coaching around that, and then that shows up in the movie. And then he eventually was able to have some success with publicity and with promoting his business. So it was a very satisfactory experience for me to be able to contribute to that.
Oh, absolutely. Is that on Netflix? Is that where somebody would find that?
It is, I think, on Amazon. But if you Google, Impact the movie, you should be able to see where it's currently released. So I'm not a producer of the film, so I don't have those
Right.
details.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
But if we could find it on look on Amazon is probably the best start.
Amazon and IMDb, it's also registered there. And so yeah, it's currently out.
And so what are you doing with your mediation and coaching practice right now? Where is that at?
Yeah. So my practice is split up into three categories. You mentioned them earlier. So one is executive coaching, where I work mostly with organizational clients, where companies hire me out to coach their executives. And so those folks are typically senior people, and they are typically really good at what they do, like engineering or production or their craft.
Yep.
What they need to do to go to their next level, as they call it, is to become more strategic and more people oriented, because at a certain level, business becomes about motivating people and doing it at scale. So I work with folks like that who need to go from being really good technologists or technical people, left brain people, to being really good right brain people. So they need to enroll people, they need to motivate people, they need to listen to people, and they need to drive the business forward. And so I work with them to help them get there. And emotional intelligence plays a huge role, because that's actually what engages that right hemisphere. They already know their engineering craft.
Yes.
I don't need to teach them that. It's more about how do you read people, how do you read the room, how do you listen to what people are saying, and how do you have that long-term view.
And is that a long-term process, or do you have like 8-week program, or is it just ongoing, or how does that work for somebody? Let's say somebody's watching this and like, oh, I like this guy, I like what he's saying.
Yeah, sure. Reach out, email me, we'll talk.
Yeah.
So for most folks in this organizational space, it's a 6-month engagement, sometimes 4, sometimes 6, depending. And so sometimes it involves an assessment and sometimes not. And it also involves typically one-on-one sessions that are sometimes weekly and sometimes monthly, depending on, on where we are in the cycle. I like to start out typically with more frequent sessions at the beginning, because we're doing skill building, we're doing trust building, and then later on we taper off to once a month to check in and make sure that the person is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Do you notice, not to put you on the spot, you can recuse yourself from answering this to take the fifth, but do you notice anything like a pattern in higher level executives? Are they typically, everybody's kind of doing the same thing that isn't working, or is it just across the board totally different?
No, I mean, there are patterns, but people are different. So in some cases, it's they've never been taught how to lead. So someone who, for example, is an engineer, has been a very successful engineer, and has more and more people, and has kind of had to figure it out up to a certain point, but they never really got leadership skills. So that's an example of just like a lack of knowledge about how it works.
Yep.
So what can happen around that, just as an example, is someone who's a very competent engineer might also like to work with other competent engineers, and might segregate their group into people who are, I don't know, higher production or better code,
Sure.
and leave out people who produce subpar code in their view, as an example. Or it takes their code longer to reach, production, or maybe that code hasn't been released, whatever. Well, that creates, a problem in the group that they may not be aware of, where people now, the morale went down. I don't know why morale went down, and how come morale is going down for everybody? I treat people equally based on their merits, et cetera, because they don't see that piece of what it's like to not be paid attention to, what it's like not to be coached, and what it's like to be just seen as a kind of a dehumanized production machine.
Yes.
Okay,
Gotcha.
so that's an example of that. Another person might have issues with confidence, where so there are some people who beg for forgiveness, some people ask for permission. So a person who asks for permission, they might not have the confidence that they can. And at a certain point, that leadership also makes other people feel nervous. So they don't trust themselves, other people don't trust them. And there are lots of other flavors of different
Do you
things.
notice, and I'm sure you've worked with both men and women.
Yeah.
Do you notice more pattern or more consistent patterns with women when they're becoming executive coaches versus a man who's in an executive coach? I mean, sorry, in an
A client of an executive
in an
coach,
executive position.
Yeah. So in my experience, I think women tend to be the permission askers and men tend to be more the forgiveness seekers. But that's very broad. Not, everyone is different.
Yeah.
And women also sometimes struggle with the right balance of being, if they're too tough, they get criticized for that. Men
You're too tough,
don't.
you're a bitch.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then, where's your executive presence kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's and that's a very difficult balance, to reach. And it also changes. So right now, I'd say that even as we speak now, a year from now, whatever I may say that's true about today may not be true about tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So these things are shifting very quickly in our society. And I also have a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety around that.
Yeah, well, change isn't always easy for everybody. It doesn't mean it's not necessary, but it definitely doesn't mean it's not
right.
Not
change
easy.
Change is only easy when it happens to you.
Yes. That's true. And you said trainer. So are you able to give present? I imagine you meant around presentations and stuff.
Yes. So the second piece of, so this is the coaching is the first piece. The second piece is mediation. And that's when I'm called sometimes by individuals and sometimes by organizations to help people get along better than they currently do. So an example would be a manager who might say, listen, I have two people who are both valuable. I don't want to get rid of either one of them, but they're not getting along well. And it's beyond my ability to help them. Can you go in and can you have this conversation with them to figure stuff out? Right. So I do those kinds of conversations as well. And then I do more commercial mediations where I get contacted by the courts who say we have a court case. So the training piece of it comes together when I am actually right now creating a course that'll be available in April, May, around teaching mediation skills to people who are not typically professional mediators, who are managers and who are coaches, to be able to work with more than one person around the issue of conflict and help them get to yes. So we're upskilling those folks.
And giving them tools, right, to help their businesses, which is actually, it's a really good program to have for people. I think most people I don't think they have the language around how to handle that.
Right. They don't have the language, and they also haven't been taught how to do it. There is a process to it. It's not magic, but it takes some skill to be able to get from A to B.
And in your the course you're talking about, are you able to demonstrate with like is visuals for people, like role play?
So yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so the course is a 20-hour course, and it's 2 days, Thursday and Friday evenings, where we go through some theory. We talk about sort of the background of how it works. And then Saturday and Sunday, attendees will have a chance to do fish bowls. They'll be grouped in groups of 4, and they'll be able to go and try out different situations and experiment with and build their own style of how to do it.
Nice. And so will you have different, or is it across the board, or will there be like uh, coaching or mediation training for executives, and then for, I don't know, say family therapists, and then
Yeah, it's a good question. So from my perspective, living inside the course, I actually want a diversity of people. I don't only want therapists and only want executives. I want people to cross-pollinate, because some people have different perspectives on what it looks like.
yeah.
But it might be that different people sign up, and I might do a specific training for an organization, in which case it'll be all executives from that organization.
Gotcha. Well, I love that idea. I love that idea. And how can people get a hold of you?
So the easiest way is to email me at alex.yaro@conflictyes.com.
Okay.
And they can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I post material on LinkedIn weekly, and I welcome dialogue and conversation. So people can find me there. I'm Alex Yaroslavsky. I've shortened my name to make it easier for people to remember the email address. But they can reach me there, and then I'm happy to engage with them on LinkedIn or via email.
Okay. And can they call you, reach out to you for a consult? Do you do consults?
Absolutely, yeah. So they can reach out to me. I'll send them a link if they want to consult, and then we'll set up a Zoom session or a phone call and have a conversation and see if it makes sense for us to work together.
I love that. Well, I'm going to put your info in the details below. So anybody watching, y'all put Alex's contact information below. And if you want to work with him, whether it's around executive coaching, mediation, or just have some interest in his trainings that he's going to have up and coming, and in the next, I guess, probably next month or so.
Yep.
And you can reach out to him there. So I'll put that stuff in the details. Thanks, Alex, for
Perfect.
coming on. It was really
Thank you.
nice to have a conversation with you. And I'm sure I will see you at the next event online somewhere.
Awesome. Thanks,
For sure.
Colleen.
Thanks. Take care, Alex.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.